This program is copyrighted. All rights are reserved. Reproduction in whole or in part, without the express prior written consent of the owner, is prohibited.
Well, you're listening to Ask Your Herb Doctor on KMUD Galville 91.1 FM and on the web at www.kmud.org. We're also live streaming this program to our Western Botanical Medicine YouTube channel, so you can listen live right now on our channel by searching Western Botanical Medicine in the search bar on YouTube and clicking on the live stream. So tonight's radio show is a further continuation, both of the newly discovered, but the information now that's coming out about C15, which is an incredibly interesting molecule that gives credence to Dr. Pete's continual support of milk. Milk and dairy. So we'll cover more about C15 and how it is intimately incorporated into every cell and how it provides structure and resistance and is totally associated with longevity. So we're going to get a little bit more into C15, and then I have some information. We started a few months ago about glyphosate toxicity and glyphosate in sugar, but glyphosate obviously turns up in a wide range of other crops. And so once we finish C15's discourse here, we're going to get into some of those pesticides. Okay, so the pesticides that turn up frequently in food and how the EPA limits are so much higher than the European Union's limits, and how none of these things are good for us, and so any limit is not good enough. There should be nothing in our food, but that's very economic. So I want to bring out some of the potential of a JFK Jr. Supported crackdown on agriculture and a return to the, I don't want to get political about it, but, you know, he was a Democrat, right? And the Democrats back in the 60s, they were really pro-free speech, pro-freedom, pro-democracy. They were the People's Party, right? But I would say that at this point in time, it's switched completely. And so JFK defecting, you know, to the Republican side, okay, it's not a political show, but if you follow JFK Jr.'s beliefs and what his father's beliefs were, they're really very humanitarian, right? So let's just get with what people are saying and let's follow what they are intending to do. So anyway, my name's Andrew Murray.
My name's Sarah Johannesson Murray. Welcome to September's show.
Okay, so yeah, it's September the 20th, 2024. We're both licensed medical herbalists. We consult with clients with a wide range of conditions. Our website is www.westernbotanicalmedicine.com, and you can visit our site to see a list of our organic medicinal herb tinctures, and our contact details are there also. Alternatively, we can reach on our toll-free number 1-888-WBM-HERB, and our Western Botanical Medicine Twitter's account is at WBM Herb, and our YouTube channel, as I mentioned here, is Western Botanical Medicine. So links to both our Twitter and YouTube channel are also on our website at westernbotanicalmedicine.com. Okay, so carrying on from last month, August 16th, 2024, we did a show which kind of halfway through we broke into C15, and so I spent the last half of last month's show discussing C15, its uses, and you know, some of the papers that have been written about. And like anything else, I think we'll see increasingly more availability of supplements, supplemental forms of C15. As I said initially, you know, it's a saturated fat found in milk. That's its principal source. Dr. Pete was a big advocate of milk drinking. I drink a lot of milk. I've always loved milk. Milk was kind of mandated. It was a kind of quote-unquote government mandate that all children in primary school would get a 1/3 bottle of milk. And I would frequently ask for another one. And my milk consumption just got bigger and bigger as I got older. So I've grown up on milk, and I've really enjoyed it, and I'm a big supporter of it. And I rarely find anybody who actually cannot tolerate it who is indeed lactose intolerant. But without carrying on about that, let me just carry on and tell you some more about some of the science behind C15 and how this is a kind of relatively groundbreaking molecule that I think could potentially be an excellent longevity supplement for people, even if they don't want to drink milk. If they can get C15 supplements, the saturated fat of C15 will be incorporated into your cells, and hopefully people that are listening have listened to Dr. Pete enough to understand that the polyunsaturates are like the bad oil, the very oxidized rapidly, they rancify quickly, they've got no place in our food, and unfortunately the industrialization of food has created this big supply of it in the food supply. Okay, so getting back to C15, the many interventions have been shown to enhance longevity in non-human species, as well as protect humans from different age-related diseases, or at least mitigate their effects. And the mechanisms of action of many of these interventions, however, are often obscure, and whether they truly have health lifespan enhancing capabilities in humans is kind of unknown at this point in time until we get a longer time to study this. Now, among the hundreds of interventions, mostly compounds and dietary manipulations, such as calorie restriction, that have been evaluated, several, including rapamycin, metformin and acarbose, have demonstrated an ability to safely target various hallmarks of aging, as well as to manage and treat chronic aging-related conditions and extend mammalian lifespan. Among these, rapamycin is often considered the most promising compound. So, rapamycin then helps stabilize cell function by inhibiting the mammalian target of rapamycin, known as mTOR, the mTOR pathway. Now, we opened this up with Dr. Pete, and he just expounded on it in his usual easy and very technical style. That rapamycin itself is an effective immunomodulator and an anti-proliferative compound, resulting in demonstrated anti-inflammatory, anti-fibrotic, and anti-cancer activities in vitro and in vivo. So both in the test tube and in life, in the organism. Now, rapamycin then is sold under the brand name as a pharmaceutical drug, but it's sold under the brand name sirolimus, and it's actually Rapamune is its brand name. That's right. Rapamune is a brand name, and sirolimus is another term for rapamycin. Now, it's a macrolide compound that's used to treat coronary stents. When people get stents placed, organisms can be attracted to the stents, and they can be sites of colonization that can be, serious, life-threatening, colonies. So, antibiotic coverage is typically given with coronary artery stent placement, and so the macrolides, a typical kind of structure is a macrocyclic, what they call a macrocyclic lactone ring, to which one or more deoxy sugars are attached. So rapamycin essentially is used for treating coronary stents, and then also a very odd and rare lung disease called lymphangioliomyomatosis, and also perivascular epithelioid cell tumors. So this compound, rapamycin, has been around for a long time, and it's pretty safe. I think one of the sad things about what I'm going to get to talk about later, with the ubiquity of pesticides in the food supply, and people, I kid you not, you're going to hardly believe what I'm going to say when we get into that. But like herbicides, pesticides are widely prevalent in our food, folks. And if you're not eating organic food, you're consuming a lot of these. And the EU has a much lower, quote-unquote, safety limit than the US does. It's obviously a financial thing. I was going to say I don't understand why, but big agribusiness, big pharma, big lobby have a lot of dominance. They exert a big effect, and so therefore I think in the European Union, where there's not quite such the kind of monopoly control of things, and healthcare is more a socialized thing that you pay higher taxes for, and there's not the incentive for private business like there is in the States for industrialized medicine, for insurance companies and the drug manufacturers, etc., in such a lucrative situation that unfortunately these limits stay pretty high, because actually to do anything about it costs a lot of money, and there's not the will for it. So anyway, talking about rapamycin, then like I said, it helps to stabilize cell function by inhibiting the mammalian target of rapamycin pathway, the mTOR pathway. Now, it's like I said, it's an immunomodulator. It's an anti-proliferative compound. It has anti-inflammatory and anti-fibrotic and anti-cancer activity. Now, although metformin, which is another excellent substance, although we're comparing C15 now with the next best things that show kind of lifespan improving activity because of the actions that they have, metformin is another one. It's been used as a medicine for nearly 4 centuries. Again, it's got an incredibly good safety profile. It has been more recently evaluated as a candidate for longevity enhancing. Now, metformin effectively and safely lowers blood sugars in humans, and as a result is the most common first-line management of type 2 diabetes that we have.
I just wanted to mention that metformin was originally designed based on an herb called Gallica officinalis, which is known as goat's rue. That's where they decided to synthesize the active components that were found in goat's rue and make the drug. But as usual with the drugs, they are missing part of the protective effects that the herb has in it.
Okay, so beyond lowering blood sugar, which is one of its main activities, metformin targets multiple hallmarks of aging that help to lower inflammation, lower oxidative stress, and repair overall cell function. So in pathways known to impact longevity, AMPK activation is upstream of mTOR, giving metformin the potential to have a broader anti-aging effect than rapamycin even, including as an mTOR inhibitor. Okay, so similar to metformin, another compound called acarbose is used to lower blood sugar in people with type 2 diabetes. And whilst I'm not supporting drugs, I'm just saying that these are the next quote-unquote best things in terms of pharmaceuticals to this compound C15. And I just want to go over some of those elements that C15 is being used for to actually show a much safer profile than any of these others, nearest competitors.
But you could always try to drink some good organic milk too.
Of course you could, that's right. But a lot of people, quote unquote, have been turned off of milk because of our society, right? Just like they've been turned off sugar. And unfortunately it's quote unquote disinformation, but that's the way things are.
Well, there's issues with milk and there's issues with sugar because of the big business and trying to mass market these products.
So, as an essential fatty acid, C15 should, by definition, support health span and longevity. Furthermore, C15 is mTOR inhibiting and AMPK activating activities that is shared with rapamycin and metformin, respectively. So, let me just. I looked at a large study of different diseases here that actually compared these 3 products together. So, metformin, rapamycin, and C15. I just want to go through some of the disease conditions just to show you the kind of situations in which C15 is being used in and being shown to be beneficial in the treatment of these particular diseases. So cardiovascular disease and chronic inflammation, that's the first category. Then autoimmunity, allergy and asthma, those again being highlighted by histamine liberation, mast cell degranulation, and that anti-allergic, anti-inflammatory type of scenario. And then chronic inflammation and cardiovascular disease, autoimmune diseases. Again, there was another study on asthma, cancer, and autoimmunity. Then for fibrosis, lung inflammation, again, asthma, allergy. COPD, the congestive pulmonary disease. Lung inflammation and fibrosis, again, chronic inflammation, wound healing, remodeling, and chronic inflammation. So the activities of C15, excuse me, kind of stem from the cell incorporation of C15 and its quote-unquote resilience. The effect of aging is in some part defined, if you like, by the lifespan of red blood cells. And so typically, if you read any physiology texts or medical journals, etc., about it, most seem to agree, I think, on a 90-day lifespan for red blood cells, over which time they become effete or worn out, and the spleen mops them up, and then the bone marrow in its continuation of that cell line, continues to churn out progenitor cells, some of which will mature into red blood cells. All of these cells, if you imagine in the body, you've got millions, if not billions, of vessels through which all of this is flowing, then you can imagine all of the, quote, turbulence or resistance to flowing that has the effects on the cell of wearing it out. If you're talking about cells passing through capillaries, they get, essentially, when the red blood cell is about 7 microns in size, some of the capillaries are barely that size. And so, there's a lot of friction. I don't know if friction is quite the right word, but when the cell meets the cell, when the red blood cell is squeezing through the capillary, it's quite a lot of tension is put on it. And so cells only last a certain amount of time before they get recirculated, and all the contents of the red blood cells become recirculated, hemoglobin, the iron, etc., etc. So, there's a kind of pool or a sink of elements into which red blood cells can be recreated and reintroduced into the circulation. But 90 days is about as long as they last. So, like I said, longevity is in some terms measured by the lifespan of red blood cells and their health throughout those 90 days. Some red blood cells won't last that long. So, as I said, it's consistent with the cell membrane pacemaker theory of aging that C15 as a stable odd-chain saturated fatty acid is readily incorporated into membranes. And it lowers the risk of lipid peroxidation, which is a big subject that Dr. Pete spoke on many times. And lipid peroxidation will happen in the presence of polyunsaturates. So those unsaturated oils rancify very quickly. And this peroxidation produces these lipid peroxidation byproducts, which are the destructive moieties that are liberated into the circulation when polyunsaturates are consumed. It's just part and parcel of the effects of this food in our food chain. So declining hemoglobin, which is the marker of red blood cell loss, has also been identified as a biomarker of an accelerated aging rate. So when you look at your hemoglobin on your complete blood count, that is also, quote unquote, a significant factor in determining someone's longevity. If they have poor hemoglobin, then obviously all of these things are wearing on the organism. They're constantly having to try and replace something which is low, and sometimes they don't have the necessary means or the raw ingredients. So all of this has an effect on the organism in terms of not being ideal, and so various other compensatory mechanisms have to come into place to make up the short-term loss or even potentially the chronic loss. All right, so just as I mentioned again, a daily supplementation of pure C15 for 12 weeks successfully increases low hemoglobin in patients. Now, the studies demonstrate that C15 can effectively slow a key biomarker of the aging rate. That's just one of the instances. In addition to slowing the aging, as you'd expect, it would be expected of a healthy lifespan and longevity-enhancing nutrients, C15 can positively affect routine clinical indices, specifically higher circulating C15 concentrations associated with and show in relevant animal and cellular models to cause lower inflammation, lower total cholesterol and triglycerides, lower glucose, and improved insulin sensitivity, as well as lower enzymes, liver enzymes, ALT, AST, healthier body weight, and as mentioned, higher and healthier hemoglobin levels. Now, this is all from a saturated fat. So I always get people will either call in or I'll get emailed, the day or weeks after the show of people that have just found out about Dr. Pete's philosophy and they've listened to our radio show and they're kind of mystified as to why we're supporting saturated fats. Well, I don't expect that ever to stop, and I welcome it. I welcome bringing that change to people and showing them the science and showing them how these things are absolutely supported over those polyunsaturates. Okay, so furthermore, there was other, but it wasn't too much of it, but there's limited evidence that C15 may support healthier body weight. Daily oral C15 supplementation lowers body weight gained in a high-fat, diet-induced obese mice. Okay, so we talk about high fat, we talk about high polyunsaturates, because that's exactly what polyunsaturates will do. They'll lower your thyroid, they'll slow your metabolism down, and the animal will gain weight. And that's exactly what happened with pigs in the first part of the 1900s, when seed oils were no longer being used to incorporate into paint. They started putting them into animal feeds, and they noticed the animals were gaining much more weight because it was slowing their thyroid down, folks, and slowing their metabolism down, and they just gained more weight and became obese. So there was a market, and that market has never really stopped, and it's been incorporated into human food ever since. So in humans, numerous large studies have shown that C15 is associated with a lower risk of heart disease, including heart failure, myocardial infarct, and coronary heart disease. And furthermore, C15 has a strong dose-dependent anti-proliferative effect on multiple cancer cell types, including human breast cancer, lung cancer, pancreatic cancer, and liver cancer, which has been attributed to several different enzyme systems, the JAK2, STAT3, and HDA C6 inhibiting activities. Now, C15 has also been shown to reverse tamoxifen resistance in breast cancer cells and improve the efficacy of gemcitabine across multiple cancer cell lines and in vivo. So it's a co-adjunct to quote-unquote what is a normal cancer treatment. Now, consistent with these studies, the cell-based phenotypic profile of C15 at higher doses, about 50 micromole, closely mimics leading and broad anti-cancer therapeutics, the gemcitabine and paclitaxel, which came from the Taxus baccata, the Irish yew, which aligns with associations found between higher circulating C15 concentration and lower risks of having breast cancer, small cell lung cancer, squamous cell carcinoma, colorectal cancer, pharyngolaryngeal cancer, and hematologic malignancies in humans. So all of these different carcinomas and cancers, etc., have been shown to be reduced in patients that are either on a high saturated fat diet from milk, and not just high saturated fats. Obviously, they're going to be coming from the animal meat, so the saturated portion of the fat there, but that's not where the C15 is. The C15 is expressly in milk fat. So plasma C15 concentrations are inversely correlated with liver fat in children, and higher circulating C15 is associated with lower liver enzymes like ALT, AST, and less severe NASH, which is the non-alcoholic steatohepatitis in adults. So it's kind of quote-unquote fatty liver disease. So how does it happen? How do these saturated fats actually reverse fatty liver? Well, it's all about the effects of the unsaturated fats that causes this in the first place. And that's what people have to remember. And this is what Dr. Pete was constantly discussing on the radio shows that we did with him. So beyond evidence that C15 lowers the risk of conditions that are leading causes of mortality, higher C15 has been linked to lower risks of a number of other aging-associated conditions, including anemia, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, hair loss, and Alzheimer's disease. Specifically, children with higher erythrocyte cell membrane C15 levels have less severe iron deficiency anemia, and daily oral C15 supplementation successfully attenuates anemia in vivo. So you're listening to Ask Your Herb, Dr. KMD Galville 91.1 FM. From 7:30 until the end of the show, we're opening up the lines for people to call in about questions either related to C15 or any of the topics that we've been talking about. The number, if you would like to call in, is 707-923-3911. And again, just want to mention the fact that this is the Pledge Drive month, and this show would not be on the air if it was not for KMUD being on the air. So please, whatever you can afford, I glibly said $100 at the beginning of the show, and that's a lot of money for some people for sure. And whatever you've got, whatever you can afford, it's going to be part of the drive, so whatever you can afford, please send it in. The show will put it to use, the radio station will put it to good use, and it's just all about keeping us on air. The address, obviously, is the website for KMUD is kmud.org. You can mail your money to PO Box 135, Redway, California, 95560. Or you can stop into the station personally and just drop it off. You know where we are, just opposite, just off of Redwood Drive. Okay, so I've just got a little bit more to say about C15. We're almost done there, actually. I think the last thing I'll say is that I came across a study in Italy. So people living in an area in Italy known to have exceptional longevity. Don't we love those places in the world that people have exceptional longevity, and then we go study it and find out why?
Yeah, for now, until something changes, they start incorporating foods that they didn't ever incorporate into their diets. We have a friend staying with us now who's purebred Mayan from Guatemala, and she's lived in this country for over 30 years. She grew up in her small village where everything was produced there. Everything was self-sufficient there. And now her family is getting excited about hamburgers and French fries, and it's all changing. And, you know, her family is all very long-lived and healthy. And, you know, things are going to start changing because they're eating food that they've never eaten for thousands of years, many thousands of years.
Okay, so the number is 707-923-3911. From just about now until the end of the show, 8 o'clock, you're invited to call in. Okay, so as I said, people living in an area in Italy known to have exceptional longevity, sometimes referred to as the blue zones or high longevity zones, have been found to have higher circulating C15 compared to people living in areas with lower overall longevity. There's an added urgency to further evaluate C15 as a healthy aging nutrient, due in part to population-wide decreased intake of whole-fat dairy products. It's our primary dietary source of C15. And circulating C15 concentrations have been declining while health issues have arisen, and suggesting this possible ecological link between decreased C15 and increased disease. As I said also, it won't be too long, and you can find it. If people want to look online, C15 supplements, I'm sure companies are starting to manufacture them. Okay, so that was the end of the wrap for C15. I wanted to cover in the next half an hour what's going on with our food, folks, and some first-hand experience with this. It's not, I haven't been searching the internet and finding out information and deciding which of this is true and which is untrue, but this is kind of first-hand. So, USA domestic pesticide and herbicide tolerances and MRLs, the maximum residue levels, are very different. And I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I think the effect, you can never underestimate the effect of money in the direction that things take. Okay? Without going on about money too much and it's being the cause of many woes, it's the main driving force of most people living and most people are alive. So, the tea, for example, okay? Just give you an idea about how different the quote-unquote, I don't know how they can ever call them safe limits of toxic pesticides and herbicides and other growth stimulants. I mean, how can there be safe limits? Number one, folks, if you're listening to me right now, just ask yourself, how can there be a safe limit of a toxic product? How can there be? It's a way to enable industrialization to continue. And when we get such massive increases in obesity, heart disease, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancers, and premature death, it begs the question, and I tell you, that's why it's happening. Since industrialization, with the advent of petrochemical, pharmaceutical, agri-chemical businesses, the reason that we're all dying, folks, is because we're exposed to these things. And don't kid yourself, there's no safe limit. So I'm going to discuss a little bit later on, JFK's dialogue on the need to have a safety committee. I don't like the word committee because it sounds like just bureaucratic machine of just more people sucking up our tax dollars, just producing paper and just wasting it. it's not very efficient, is it? I think most people can say when you get a private industry to do something, it's generally more efficient because there is the need to be efficient because there is, quote unquote, only so much money. When things are done by the government with our taxes, there is, quote unquote, no real lack of money. And so the machine that is the government becomes humongous. Anyway, so, cutting, and again, I don't want to just say cutting regulations is the way forward, because obviously some regulations are necessary. I'm not an anarchist, but I'm also, I want to be able to take care of whatever I can manage myself without having someone doing it for me or telling me how to do it. So it's definitely not an easy solution, but I love to hear when someone says what I truly believe is where their heart is coming from, and that is that they want safe food. I say, okay, well, the first thing I think about is how expensive is it going to be to enable people to afford it, okay? Well, I came here in 2001, okay, from Britain, and when I left England in 2001, there had been for half a dozen years a big wave of organics in England. It was really, you'd call it hip. It was just really trendy. It was hip. It was everywhere. You could walk into local supermarkets and, from the Tesco's and the Sainsbury's, and they would have this huge organic section. And it was like that for quite a few years. I came here in 2001, and I came here to San Francisco where I first started, and, finding organic stuff wasn't that easy, wasn't that popular, wasn't that in demand. It's slowly caught on over here. And, organics in California, folks, because this is California, is definitely very trendy and very hip and great. I'm glad it is trendy and hip because it's the only way forward. And then what happened in England was that slowly but surely I'd go there every couple of years. In the first 2010, there was still some organics there. And, I go back in 2013 and 2016, 2019, increasingly less and less availability of organic products. So at some point, last year I went back in 23 and 22. You don't find that much organic unless, number one, you're going to a fairly wealthy place like in Oxford, or Cambridge, or any of those kind of wealthy areas where there's a big population of people that are either studying at university, and so they're quote unquote intelligent and they have financial means, etc., etc. So it's an economic thing. And I would ask them, well, what's happened to the organic products? Well, why are there so few? And it's same old, same old. Well, people stopped buying it. They couldn't afford it. So it begs the question, why does it get so expensive? Why does it get so expensive? Or is that really the case? Is it a case of people just don't really care? Or is it a case of there is a kind of a war being waged on that by alternative industries that have got no vested interest in you eating organic food because they're growing their GMO crops and they're doing very well and they're very good at it, and it's in everything that you could possibly wish to eat. So, going back to the limits for the USA and the EU, I looked at some typical foods, and being GMP compliant, we have to test our herbs. Obviously, there is no allowed amount of a pesticide or an herbicide. It's not allowed. Our certified CCOF, there's zero limit to it. So when we test things, if there's any presence, and I have found this, and it's really disturbing, in organic product that's sold to me, comes with a C of A showing me that it's got zero pesticides in it or zero herbicides in it, and I had to go and third party test it and find out that it does. It's like, whoa, what's going on? So I think this is a big subject that's going to, it's going to get airtime, and it's going to shake the industry, because you either have standards that are worth implementing and enforcing, or you have no standards, because that's the easiest default, is to have no standards, folk. Let's just eat GMO corn, GMO wheat, let's just eat glyphosate and sugar, and just, we die at 30 or 40, that's long enough, isn't it? That's kind of it right there. So, do we want good, safe, clean, organic food? Do we want clean air? Do we want clean water? I do. Who of you out there doesn't? It's probably less than 1% if people were intelligent enough to think about it. And I wouldn't give money as the only cause for not wanting it. I would say that actually, no, we've got to press our elected officials to create safe food, safe, healthy water, and all the rest of it, and it's not, I don't think it's difficult. I really don't. I think it's just political will and the powers that be in the positions that they're in just not giving up on maintaining the control of it. So when I hear JFK Jr., I'm talking about
RFK.
Sorry,
RFK.
RFK.
Sure you get it right.
Yeah. When I hear RFK Jr. talking about, clean food for children, especially with a massive increase in autism that he suffered in his family personally, and you look at, JFK's mandate in 1963, like I said then, the Democrats were totally about, transparency, good living conditions, democracy, freedom of speech, making sure things were healthy and safe for people that were growing up in this wonderful, beautiful USA, folks. This is it, land of opportunity. Here it is, and yet he was assassinated. And I'll go through that very quickly if we get the time. So the lights were flashing. I don't know if anybody was on the air. I'll keep going until they cut in. But so talking about the EPA limits in the States and the EU limits, and I'm not, again, for draconian bureaucracy and massive committees and wasting our tax dollars just blathering about it but not doing anything, or doing things that are so draconian that it gives you no choice whatsoever and there's no other alternative. That tea, for example, there's a 15 part per million tolerance limit for a compound, a pesticide called zeta-cypermethrin. Okay, I've had samples of certified organic herb testing at 0.064 milligrams. Okay, and the EU sets its limit at 0.005. Okay, so way higher limit in the States, and this is actually, it's allowed. It's not a prohibited substance. Like so many of these other substances, they're not prohibited. They just have limits that are, quote, so much higher than the EU because the EU is doing more about it and actually recognizes that there is, quote unquote, no safe limits, but yet haven't wiped out the agribusiness control of everything because they are still working through it, I guess. Anyway, let's take this first caller. Caller, you're on the air. Where are you from? What's your question?
I'm right from Humboldt County here. It's Dr. Andrew Murray.
Yeah.
Am I?
Yeah, well, I don't call myself a doctor. I'm not an MD.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, how about Andrew and Sarah?
Yeah, I'm a naturopathic physician. Oh. Yeah, I'm a medical herbalist is what I would call myself in England. I'm licensed and insured to practice medicine in England. But here in the States, it's a very different kind of. But anyway, carry on.
Well, I'm just.
It's not about me.
I'm applauding your organic endorsements, and of course, that's the best foundation to build from. We've gotten away from that a bit in our generation. I'm 62, so I'm just a puppy.
I'm not far behind
you. King Charles, he's an organic man too.
Yeah, right. The Duchy Organics.
It's my only hope for the monarchy.
Yeah, well, that was a pretty good call for a king of England. When he did that back in the 80s, I think, okay, good on you, Charles. And he was also anti a lot of other things too. I think he was. I don't know if he would say it on air, but I think he was probably just as supportive of the knowledge of the presence of things like chemtrails or HARP or any other quote-unquote conspiracy theory, because I think actually they know probably a lot more about it than most people.
Well, a chap like him is going to be excluded from a lot of really intelligent conversations because of capitalism. That, it explains itself, I think.
Yeah.
But on the brighter side, I do give him high credit, and I have a friend, Penny, that's a programmer there, that will abuse me for saying that. But anyways, I deserve it, and we all could do better. My point is, organic farming is such a simple concept. It is more expensive, possibly, but what is more expensive than your or why would you want to be not frugal on your diet?
On your health.
Spend everything on your diet. Don't drink a beer.
Right.
And spend that extra money.
That's exactly what I was saying last month.
I'm not speaking as well as I would like. I just know that it's so simple.
It's too simple.
It worked for so long, and it will work now.
Right.
We just need to get capitalism out of it.
Well, when you hear what I've got here in front of me, you'll be, I don't think people are aware of it. I really don't, actually. I think most people are just so worked and got their heads down, paying the bills, paying the mortgage, paying the taxes, that they just don't have the time of day to look up and turn around and go, well, actually, what's in this hamburger? You know, and most people don't have the means to test it. And some people they would not want to recognize it because they couldn't, quote unquote, do anything about it. And it would just make their day even worse.
Well, if you had organic bread, organic tomatoes, organic lettuce, and organic beef, you would not buy a burger from any other place.
Yeah, no, I know.
You actually had something that was that divine.
Yep, and you can taste the difference, and you can totally taste the difference. I don't care what anyone says. Oh, it doesn't make any difference. It's absolutely different.
Well, ironically, our local area here that does a lot of dairy, and I was cussing you guys a little bit just because I'm lactose intolerant, and you couldn't really force me. Still got a little spunk in my step there. You couldn't force me to drink a glass of milk. I'm sorry.
Well, we're confident that we could retrain your intestines to handle it, but that's what, of course, you would have to be up for the challenge.
Well, obviously, I'm not very smart, so
no. It's everybody has a choice to do whatever they want, and also everybody's body's different. And
I wouldn't fight you. I appreciate you doing that because it is a really, really nutritious. You couldn't take my cheese away from me, so there you go. I'm a hypocrite.
Well, there you go. If you like cheese, there you're getting a minuscule amount of lactose, so there's even more hope that you would be able to tolerate.
Cheddar cheese that's my Achilles heel.
Yeah, well, it's funny you mention beer. Don't drink a beer. Go, buy some organic
vodka.
No,
I've quit the beer. It just makes me have dreams about being a linebacker, kind of stuff like that. And I'm an organic farmer, so I want to be
good for you, brother.
Pulling weeds and loving those weeds, thanking those weeds for telling me what's going on in the soil and showing me that you don't have to get rid of all of you just when you start to flower, and then we got to deal with you. But it's about getting along, and that's kind of what I'm saying. It's the organic thing with our dairy up here in Humboldt County. Our dairy, they used to poo-poo the organic farmers that were, or dairy ranchers that were making organic milk. We ended up making so much more milk, organic milk, because it wasn't that hard to change, but there was the money, there was the economic interest that really changed it. And it's just a good example of how good quality product can be also good for everybody.
Yep, awesome. I think
I'll let you guys go.
No worries.
We'll have to have a glass of milk together.
I appreciate your call. Thank you. I think the engineer's telling me that someone else was on the. Okay.
And I wanted to mention that wine is one of the most toxic crops. We were talking about grapes last month and the chemicals that are on, 99% of non-organic grapes
had 2 or 3
up to 12 different petrochemical agri-chemicals on them, pesticide, herbicide, fungicide, and beer and wine is a very odd category with the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, the ATF, and the Tax and Trade Bureau. You can put over 200 different ingredients in beer and wine as just processing aids, chemicals, and you don't have to list them on the label. It's a very bizarre thing. So for folks out there who do like to have a glass of wine or a glass of beer, please make sure it's organic, and please check with the company making it that they don't use harmful ingredients when they're making that, because like I said, 200 different ingredients, plus they spray the heck out of grapes if they're not organic.
Okay, so let's just revisit the maximum residue levels, okay, just to give you folks here in the States some idea of how different it is, okay? You don't have to be scientific to appreciate the numbers. So if I just take a look at things like let's see here. I got a whole bunch of different foods, and they've all got different parts per million allowances. And I just want to quickly do the math on some of these to know and to tell you what we're looking at. So if you've got, if in the EU, for example, some of these crops, and they range, from fruit, stone fruit, grapes, then they go even through crops that you feed animals like grass and hay, and then nuts, peanuts, sunflower oil, etc., etc. I'll just pull out a couple of these numbers and just tell you what we're looking at. So if the maximum limit for these in the EU, which is the way it is for these things I'm talking about now, is 0.01 milligram per kilo, and in the US, 5 milligrams per kilo is the norm. You do the math. You take 5 milligrams and you divide it by 0.01 milligrams. It gives you a concentration that's 500 times more. So here in the US, it's possible for us to be exposed to 500 times the limit that you should be exposed to if everyone's doing their job in the European Union. I'm not lauding the European Union for its democratic bureaucracy, but 500 times the limit, you will get exposed to it. You do get exposed to it. And this is if you're not eating organic food. You're going to get exposed to 500 times what is allowable in Europe. Okay, so let's just talk about a couple of other chemicals there's over 500 pesticides that are in common use, okay? And I just don't think people know. I think if most people knew this, they'd be weeping. So another fungicide, ubiquitous, typical. What I'm talking about here is not odd and not off the wall, and it's not rare. It's absolutely common. So phenol, aka biphenyl 2-ol. Okay, it's a fungicide. So the European level, again, is set at 0.01 milligrams per kilo. The US level, again, is 300 times higher. Another fungicide called boscalid. The European Union sets a limit again at 0.01. It's almost like when you read these numbers, folks, it's like the European Union have dealt with this for longer, and they've gone, you know what? And it's always in magnitudes of 10. If you look at a logarithmic scale, it's like 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, etc. So 10 to the power of. So the log scale it seems to me like the EU have decreased their log scale allowable permissible limits, by the order of 2 or 3, whereas the US is just still sitting there in, well, you know what, until people start croaking and we start paying more attention to people while they're dying like this, actually, unless it's really dangerous, we're not going to do too much about it because it's industry driven. Okay, so cyprodinol, it's another fungicide. Again, EU limit is 0.01 milligrams per kilos, or 0.01 parts per million. That's what it equates to. In the States, the stone fruits and raisins at 3 milligrams per kilo is allowable, and that's 3 parts per million. So compare 3 parts per million to 0.01 parts per million, and you've got 300 times, again, the limit. And the last thing I want to talk about, this is just kind of a personal experience, really, folks, sadly, quinoxyphen. It's used for powdery mildew. The EU limit is 0.01, again, no surprise. The US limit is 2 parts per million, so it's 200 times more allowed. There's 200 times more that you can consume, folks, and it's safe. Okay, all right, so while many pesticides are effective, quote unquote, I'm not talking from an organic perspective, I'm talking about from a non-organic farmer and the information they get on there. Well, if you use this fungicide and you get this powdery mildew in your crop or your grapes, you can go ahead and spray them with this 4 times a year, and it's totally safe. And if you look at the EPA and you look at the National Registry, you can see all of the places that are using pesticides and or herbicides. Obviously, as long as they're disclosing it. I'm sure some people don't, but it's one of those things. You see a number, and then you can just believe it's probably 10 or 100 times worse than that because of underreporting. So, in addition to being the world's largest agricultural producers and exporters, this is just grouping a few nations together here just to get an idea of the scale of things, the EU, Brazil, USA, and China are some of the world's largest pesticide users. Okay, so think about these countries, the EU, Brazil, USA and China. They each use 827 million, 831 million, 1.2 billion for the US and 3.9 billion pounds of pesticides. This was back in 2016, okay?
That's like all of the Northern Hemisphere, the EU, China and the USA.
Well, it's not all of it, but yeah.
I mean, that's unbelievable. Mm-hmm. So the Southern Hemisphere hardly uses any.
Well, we don't know that. They don't, but Brazil is in the Southern Hemisphere.
Well,
so.
I know Brazil's in there, but that's just...
Well, what I'm getting at, okay, is I'm not pointing the finger at China.
Those are big crops coming
yeah.
from China, USA, and the EU. I mean, that's... All of Europe is in the EU, practically.
Well, yeah.
Apart from Britain.
They don't count Russia in there, I suppose, but...
I know in Russia, Putin said he wants to be the biggest exporter of organic produce ever.
Interesting. So anyway, I'm not pointing the finger at China, folks, but China constituted 4.27 times that used in the EU. All right. So again, the USA, EU, China and Brazil each have separate and distinct pesticide regulatory systems designed to protect, to varying degrees, humans and the environment. The EU, consisting of 28 member states, currently has the most comprehensive and protective pesticide regulations of any major agricultural producer. Okay, the European Commission oversees pesticide approval, restriction and cancellation in the EU in accordance with these regulations, which are designed to ensure that... we're going to call it people are protected, right? So, the EU prohibits the approval and continued use of pesticides that the governing bodies recognise as mutagens, carcinogens, reproductive toxicants or endocrine disruptors, unless exposure to humans is considered negligible. Now, it's 7:54, so I really don't want to miss out what I really wanted to share with you, which is right at the end of this. I'll carry on with this kind of pesticide discourse at the beginning of next month's show, but I really don't want to drop the ball and not mention this because I just think it's so real. As I said, I just wanted to speak about Kennedy Jr.'s endorsement, of the need for an agency to monitor and prohibit agri-chemicals and to adopt this kind of revolutionary health-based agricultural revival here in the homeland. So based on organic standards, hopefully then that will result in the improvement of the health of Americans, far outweighing in its cost to implement the current crisis facing Americans in poor health, and the trillions spent on healthcare, and the massive agencies and interest groups with some of the poorest health outcomes worldwide, not just as developed nations, but even outcomes between the USA and underdeveloped nations, folks. I mean, we're talking about the healthcare costs in the States, and I think they're 67th on the world board for health outcomes. 67th. And I think we spend more than any other nation on healthcare. So there's no doubt, whatsoever that organic food, whether it's vegetables, fruit or livestock, is not just healthier, but it's safer, for mankind and the environment that we inhabit. It's vital that small-scale local organic farmers, as well as large commercial organic operations, are allowed to thrive and that the prices they charge are affordable for everyone if we're to succeed in this transition. And I just also wanted to bring out this thing here, and I think it's a kind of misnomer about Kennedy and the gold standard. This is something else I found. In 1961, the Agriculture Act of 61 is worth noting as a sustainable framework for improving the lives of Americans. Now, I don't hear much on it, and how many of you know this, but President John F. Kennedy's monetary policy, it's a little bit of a digression here, but it all points the same direction, was a unique and significant approach to the country's economic growth, focusing on combined fiscal and monetary policies to achieve a balanced budget and sustained economic growth. His Executive Order 1110, which granted the Treasury Department the authority to issue silver certificates, not gold, was designed to promote economic growth and stability by focusing on both fiscal and monetary policy. This order could have revolutionized the U.S. financial system by introducing a silver-backed currency that could compete with the Federal Reserve dollar. It was a step towards a more equitable and democratic economy, and it's a shame that its potential was never fully realized. Imagine a world where silver certificates had an intrinsic value, making them irresistible to investors and contributing to the growth of the US economy. In his speech on June 4th, 1963, JFK stated that Executive Order 1110 was an important step forward in creating a sound and stable monetary system. He was assassinated 5 months later on November 22nd, 1963. JFK Jr. has made some headlines recently. RFK Jr., stating his withdrawal from the Democratic Party as they are no longer the party of the people, but big agriculture, big pharma, and big tech, no longer interested in the visionary stance of Democrats in the 60s, but now more allied to totalitarian China in 2024. It seems the tables are once again changing, and the only thing that remains constant is change. The dissemination of knowledge, however, makes it more transparent to those who have ears. Let them hear what the Spirit says. We're exhorted to be faithful stewards with what we've been given to maintain and improve the earth, and we are charged with safeguarding this for ourselves and our children. If we fail in this, we fail as a species, and our destruction will be ensured. It's a testament to the NGOs, the special interest groups and powerful lobbies which exist to support big agriculture and big chemical, that the corruption within undermines us all. So we're coming to the end of the KMED show. I appreciate all those of you who've listened and for that caller. They are up on our YouTube channel. They'll be up, I think it's live stream now, so it should be there. But anyway, we exist here to produce certified organic herbal medicinal extracts, and that's my training back in 1993. And so, yeah, we're very big advocates of organic. It's not just medicinal herbs, but foods. You're listening to Ask Your Herb, Dr. KMD Gulfpool 91.1 FM. My name's Andrew Murray.
My name's Sarah Johannesson Murray, and our website is www.westernbotanicalmedicine.com.
This program is copyrighted. All rights are reserved. Reproduction in whole or in part without the express prior written consent of the owner is prohibited.